Welcome to my channel. I'm Polaris. It's nice to meet you if you are new here, and it's great to see you again if you are back. So, today it's Missionary Man Day. I love this song and I've been on a cowboy Wild West mood currently, so nothing better than work with Missionary Man as an illustration for the Ghost series that I've been doing. This one I decided to try some style changes. Nothing too much, given it's right up the alley with the other ones, but it is a bit different. I've been taking some time to study the style of the illustrations of the official brand merch and other artists who actually only draw in this style. And I've noticed on the last illustration, Majesty, that what I was lacking was flat, all black places as shadows. It's pretty much in line with more of a comic book style of illustration. I do read more mangas than Western style comics, but it's pretty much cel shading with hard blacks instead of colors, if that makes any sense. My main reference, to be honest, is the horror manga Helloooo. It is one of my all-time favorites, but it's packed with violence, adult themes, and a lot of really heavy violent scenes that can make people squirm. So if you're not into it, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're into horror and more violent horror such as the Saw movie series or slasher movies, I think you will be fine with Helloooo. Going on a tangent already, but yours truly here is pretty squeamish when it comes to violent movies like those. I absolutely love horror movies. It is one of my favorite genres and pastimes, but man, my tolerance with violence is kinda low. I've only watched the first Saw movie recently, and I don't know if I can take the others. And some other classic movies that do sound interesting and I do want to watch, I'm seriously considering if I can tank the more violent parts, such as Hostel. But to be fair with myself, those movies came out when I was pretty young, like 10 or 11 years old, and I was notoriously scared of anything horror. I only started enjoying horror when I got into high school and started watching Supernatural with my dad. And even so, he watched the episodes in advance to tell me which ones I'd be too scared, so we would jump them, and he'd brief me on those episodes so I could keep up with the main plot. Bless his soul. But hey, do tell me in the comments if you have any horror movies, series, comics or mangas that you would like to recommend. I've been currently reading a manga called Karada Sagashi, and oh boy, am I hooked on it. I can't put it down, but again, it's pretty violent like Helloooo, so I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. Well, with that horror side tangent done, we're back to our current program, the Missionary Man illustration. I mentioned Helloooo as a reference for illustrating with this kind of inking because there are a lot of what I call quote-unquote hard blacks here. If you take a look at some a la carte illustrations and panels on the manga, sometimes it's all hard black with his hands and face in white, which gives a lot of contrast given that mangas aren't colored illustrations like Western comics. I kinda apply the same line of thought here. I'm going with blocks of hard blacks, and some places that would be different colors are in white. But then I fell in a dilemma that I haven't thought before when I started drawing. What do I do with the lines inside the hard black parts? And I only thought about that after I finished drawing Terzo's hair and started filling in with the black. Because wanting it or not, if I just put on a lot of black, I lose the information of volume on his hair and head, as well as the impression that there are strands of hair there instead of just like a pitch black block. On Helloooo, that's pretty much what some of the style goes for. Alucard is pretty much this weird, omnipresent, scary entity that emerges from the shadows, so it's okay if you can't make out volume or forms inside the hard black. But in this case, I didn't want to lose that information, so I started testing painting the lines inside the hard black with white. Luckily and happily, it worked. When working like that on Krita, I click on the layer I am working on and select the option of creating a group with a clipping mask. I think it's called a clipping group in English, something like that. That will automatically create a group folder with 2 layers inside. The layer with the drawing you were working on and a new layer already on a clipping mask mode. That means if you paint on the clipping mask layer, it will only fill in with color the line work on the layer below that you were working before, inside the group folder. That's how I managed to paint only the strands of hair with white. It's a little different from Photoshop and it took me some time to discover how to do that on Krita, so I figured it would be nice to mention it. I hope you can understand what I tried to explain here. With that done, that's how I decided I would work on this illustration, blocking hard blacks and keeping any lines inside, such as folds on clothing, the strands of hair, etc., colored in white. It backfired though when it came to actually painting the clothes. I am very fond of my line work because, to be quite honest, that's my favorite part of drawing. I really love doing line art and spending time to make it look nice, so I do like it to show on the illustration, especially when I'm working with this brush that I'm using in this illustration. With my webtoon, for instance, I am not that much of a perfectionist with my line work, so I give myself some more room for mistakes in order to be able to work on it faster. That being said, I wanted the line work to show on this illustration, but it wasn't going to if I just painted everything black. Yes, cueing Rolling Stones, I'll be mentally singing Paint It Black till the end of this video. To solve this little problem, I left a little quote-unquote white margin between the actual line work and the parts filled with hard black. It worked quite nicely, so I decided to do that with all the parts in black. I mentioned it on the Majesty video. With Ghost, there is a lot of black going on. Most clothes are black and it's pretty difficult to color like that. And that's what made me look into this inking style a little more and change it for this particular illustration. I did enjoy the result, so it's a thing I'm gonna be keeping for the next illustrations on this series. Plus, it makes the actual coloring part a lot easier. Regarding the composition and pose on this illustration, I think it was the most difficult one I've ever done, even more than Majesty with Terzo sitting on a throne. We all have our Achilles heels, right? Mine is drawing buttocks. I'm not even joking. The idea was super cool and badass in my head, drawing Terzo sitting from behind, holding an unholy Bible dressed in full cowboy attire with it written "Don't mess with the Missionary Man" beside him. I was thinking about those missionary men of that time, really, who went around spreading the word of God and bringing civilization to uncivilized pagans. We have had a lot of that in my country when it was colonized, and they would do everything in their power to raise the faith of the native people. And I have to say, even with all those efforts, we are still scared of the local legends, such as Curupira, Boitatá, Mula Sem Cabeça, and many others. Here in my country, though, it has mostly been Portuguese and Spanish missionaries. The aesthetics are pretty different, and I didn't want to work with those priest robes. My head went immediately to the many different priest robes they wear in Rammstein's music video Rosenrot. and given I was drawing terzo from behind, I wanted to show his legs or it would be too dull, in my opinion. Plus, Missionary Man is pretty bluesy and country, so I wanted to keep the cowboy Wild West vibes. I thought about the whole Undertaker aesthetic, but for that I would need a long coat to his feet, and that would get me to the very same issue as the old school priest robes. I did think of some of the clothes Richie Sambora used to wear on the 80s during the One That Dead or Alive era with Bon Jovi, but the thing with that is that it looks pretty cool and gives that badass sort of Undertaker vibes with him because of his body shape. Richie has very broad shoulders and his coats would make them look even broader and fall down on a more rectangular shape, being the rest of his body very rectangular. But with Terzo, he's got more of a smaller waist and broader hips, and his shoulders aren't that broad. So I could give him more of a rectangular body shape, but something will look kinda off. Again, in my opinion at least. I mean, even with the whole thing of manipulating shapes when designing clothes and characters, we still have to stick with said character's body shape and work around that. I would have to change too much of his body shape to give him those vibes, and to me personally, that would change him in essence, so I scrapped the idea. Still, I thought about working with the long coat, making it more of a triangular shape rather than a rectangular shape, but with him being seen from the front. But that would defeat the whole badass sort of dangerous, sort of mysterious vibes I wanted. It comes mostly because we are seeing him from behind, and he has that half smile on his lips looking back at us. I thought about a cowboy slash missionary hat too, but it didn't balance too well with the rest of his clothes and shapes on the drawing. Plus, I liked too much how his hair turned out, so no hat. I went with the short coat instead. I searched lots of pictures on Pinterest of alternative cowboy styles, and may the gods bless goth cowboys, you people are gorgeous and a sight for sore eyes. And started designing the clothes from there. Having the idea to paint Terzo's cross on the back to give it a little more of a highlight. And now we'd get back to... I am bad at drawing buttocks. Seriously, I can't draw a decent buttock being seen from behind to save my life. And I only realized that with this drawing. Around a year ago, I started doing figure drawing sketches, which has helped me immensely and I recommend it to everyone. Basically, it's just taking photos of people doing whatever and drawing them as quickly as you can. It doesn't have to be beautiful nor perfect, but it's important to catch the movement, the movement and the proportions. Another thing I did was draw many times different groups of muscles and the same body parts over and over again. For instance, I would take an entire week to study the torso. So I would study the muscles, draw it twice or thrice the muscles on the torso, and then find many different photos from people and focus mostly on their torso, muscles and its shading. Next week I would do it with arms, then legs, then feet, and you get the idea. Lo and behold, I neglected the buttocks on my studies. It sounds really stupid, but now I notice I didn't draw many people from behind, and the drawings I did, they were mostly sitting down. Therefore, I am a failure at drawing buttocks in the wild. That is a lesson, really. Never neglect a part of your studies, even if you think you're already good at it or that it won't be useful. It might be someday. Now I hear you wondering, but Pilates, what about the back? back muscles are a pain, don't you find them difficult? And I will tell you, yes, I do find that difficult. It's a pain and one of the most difficult things I've ever drawn in my life. Then why didn't I have a hard time with that, I hear you wonder. Well, in my studies, once I saw a picture of a shirtless drummer from behind, but more from his right side, meaning you could still see part of his face from the back and a little from his torso as well. It was a very interesting angle, and I thought to myself, well, I have to train this, and different angles are always welcome, so how difficult can it be? It was the most difficult thing I've ever did in my life. I have so many drawings of the very same photo because it took me so long to get it right. You have no idea. I repeated it around 8 times, I think. I drew it over the photo twice. Then I drew it on the side of the file and again and again. Then on the next day I sketched it on my sketchbook from memory around 3 times. Then I tried it on the sketchbook again from observation once more to finally be able to do the final drawing. But after that, back muscles don't scare me anymore. I pretty much think about that drawing every time I'm about to draw someone sing from the back, and something clicks inside my head and my hand and things just flow. That is why it's important to study everything and not neglect anything. Cueing me staring at so many pictures of both men and women from behind only to find a good reference to draw a decent pair of buttocks on terzo. Satan is working hard here, you know. After that, the rest of the sketch started to flow and I got the pose right. I always talk about this, but I think for this illustration I had around 4 sketches, one of them being the one I call the final refined version. For sketches, I usually do a very low effort sketch first, with the overall idea of the shapes, clothes and pose. Nothing detailed, just looking really bad and ridiculous. Then I get to sketch the body and muscles defining the body shape. You know the whole thing I blabbered about Richie not having the same body shape as Terzo? It comes into play here. That's where I decide if I'm going to exaggerate some parts of the body or not. I am pretty much realistic with my style, but I do use some stylization here and there. To give a more practical example, Terzo's waist and leg proportions. I always exaggerate and mark his waist a lot more than the usual, as well as make his legs longer, because those are 2 of his easily identifiable body features. And that goes for Mr. Ghost, the man behind the mask. So the papas who use more tight clothing, so to speak, like Terzo and Copia, have the smaller waist, and all of them have ridiculously long legs, because I swear this man is 80% legs. Having the sketch with the body shape and some muscles blocked, I then make another sketch to add the clothing on another layer and see what works and what doesn't. It's kind of like playing a dress-up game with your character you're drawing, and I'll tell you, I was a sucker for that when I was a kid. I still miss good dressing up games. Sometimes I do 2 or 3 different clothing tests to see which one I like most, if I don't already have a good idea of what I want. In this case, I was first going with like a normal length coat, but I didn't want to lose the detail of his smaller waist, like I said before, or else it would be just a square on the upper body and a rectangle for the legs, and he would look stiff. With us being able to see the waist, it adds a little more movement and it looks like there is something in the middle, so it doesn't look that stiff. After that, I had another layer to sketch his face more decently, to actually look like him and add his facial features. This is the easiest part for me, because I actually learned to draw by looking at people's photos and doing realistic drawings of them. I might do a sketchbook tour one day and you will see that a lot of it is just realistic drawings of people. With all of that together, I have what I call the final refined sketch, and that's the one I will be using underneath to start the line work and actual illustration. I don't record this process because it kind of feels like having someone staring at you drawing from over your shoulder, but if you guys would like to see it, do tell me below. I'll start recording so you can have an idea of how long it takes and how much work it is to just get the sketch done, so you can do the actual line art and painting. Well, on this one, once I was done with the line art and the hard black parts, I just chose a shade of red that I liked and painted some of the areas I left in white. The only white part I wanted for the illustration was his face, so I'm filling up everything, or as you'll see with the cross on his back, it's a very light shade of grey. Oh, and about the cross. I had a reference of the embroidery, and when I got to it, I seriously questioned my sanity and why I decided to add that as such an important detail that I can't just simply imply some detail instead of actually doing everything. But then I took a deep breath and got to work. And I forgot the horizontal arms of the cross. I'm not kidding, I just noticed that a couple of days ago while seeing some of my notifications I got from posting it on my blog. I was always like, there is something wrong and I can't quite pinpoint what it is, and then upon seeing it again for the 100th time, I was like, oh, it's the cross. I forgot the horizontal arms. The little diva with detailed clothing got me. So yes, even after all the careful planning and time invested, you can still make a stupid mistake like that. Cue in that scene in Casper where her father is singing "That's Life" to her in the car while they move to the haunted mansion. The rest was just me arguing with myself on the font and lettering size and the background. The idea was to have an inverted cross behind him, and I still don't know if I like it or not, because something inside of me says it looks more like the Union Jack rather than an inverted cross. Don't know. The little fashion punk inside of me sees Union Jacks everywhere. I still think it might look better without the cross and just the black background. So, you see, you can finish and post a piece and still argue with yourself if it looks good and that you could have done better. And that's ultimately what I always talk about. Just consider it done and move on to another project. You'll learn and do better on the next ones. And who knows, maybe you can do redraws, those are always fun. I have a drawing from Dante from Devil May Cry that I did on 2009, I think, when I was in high school. Then I remade it recently, I think in 2019. It's on my plans to do it again one more time with the things I know now and compare the three of them. I think I will bring it on the channel when I get it done. It's something that allows me to see how much progress I made over the years and how just a little bit of studying and time can already make a huge difference. If you have a drawing you like from a long time ago like me, I suggest you take it and make it a redraw. Or maybe pick a drawing you made like a year or two ago. You will be able to see the difference and how much you have improved in such a short span of time, even if you think you didn't. Well, for this video I think that's it. I had a lot of fun with Missionary Man and I love this song, so it was an interesting illustration to work with. I want to get more into that inking style. I am studying the Hades game character designs and style once again. So maybe I will bring more art like that and advices from the things I discover and pick up along the way. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks a lot for watching, for liking and subscribing if you did. And as I always say, hope you have a nice week and hope to see you again soon.